What if a company, researcher, government, or other organization deployed a bunch of sensors to collect data from the ocean and shared it with others? You may think, companies do this all the time with our personal data. Who cares? But what if the people who bought or used those data made decisions far away to totally change your ocean space, displacing, exploiting, polluting, and degrading your oceanscape, and impacted all the people and communities that live, work, and play there? This is real and rapidly evolving problem in the name of growing the blue economy. In this video, I'll share my perspectives on ocean data ethics after nearly 30 years in the ocean space. It is my hope that the ideas presented will provide a starting point for policies around ocean data. Stick around to the end where I'll show you how you can steward your own data to make informed decisions in your community. Let's dive in. Hi, I'm Dr. Christine Ward-Page, a marine scientist and the founder of eOceans, the ocean platform that's always analyzing your team's ocean data that's entered in the eOceans app. For the ocean, for us. As you are all well aware, the ocean is spectacular and spectacularly important for everyone on this planet. The realization of this importance has grown in recent years, for mitigating climate change and biodiversity loss, feeding a growing human population, and supporting the growing blue economy. As such, the number of organizations that are rushing to extract and sell or use ocean data has rapidly grown. Not only to better understand the ocean and how to better protect it, but also to help companies and governments do business. Where these data are stored, who has access, and how they are used matters. These data are used for many reasons, including to place mining operations, aquaculture facilities, developments, energy sites, and more, which can rapidly diminish the quality of life for many local communities. For example, some organizations are mapping the seafloor using vessels of opportunity. Those vessels are collecting bathymetric data while transiting the ocean and making those data and maps open for everyone to use, which sounds great, until the location of underwater pinnacles are placed on that map for all to see. A map that industrial overseas fishers and poachers can use to target and overexploit already depleted fish populations. This is especially problematic in areas with limited regulatory or enforcement capacity. Something so seemingly simple as a tourist scuba diver innocently logging their observations in a free dive log app or free nature logging app. These typically come in two forms, open and freely available, or where the data are sold, and both expose those fish and the communities that depend on those fish to poachers who use those data to fish out those sites. These scenarios are all real. They highlight the urgent need for the development of ethics protocols for collecting and sharing ocean data around the world, because every location has different needs. Don't misunderstand me. I understand the value of detailed data sets for understanding the ocean and making informed decisions. But there are significant costs and risks that need to be considered and mitigated. In my experience, very few people consider the ethics of ocean data outside of their own perspective. And those perspectives vary greatly between academics, governments, businesses, inventors, NGOs, and so on. These risks, however, could be far-reaching and unforeseen. Generally, when collecting data that could impact humans, ethics protocols state that participants should be fully informed about the risks. Misleading or wasting their time is unethical. Communities have the right to protect livelihoods, social and cultural values, and have the rights to clean, healthy, and sustainable environment. Projects that collect data from local knowledge holders or coastal communities without their consent is unethical. When working with animals, protocols stipulate that the number of animals and their degree of suffering should be minimized. Therefore, if you collect data about animals that could help protect them, but don't use those data for that purpose, that would be considered unethical. Environmental ethics generally aim to protect and sustain biodiversity and ecological systems. We need to be sure that our data don't enable people with nefarious intentions and that we maximize benefit while minimizing risk. Because we all have different perspectives on the ethics of ocean data, let me set the context for my own mindset. Before founding eOceans, I spent 2 decades studying the ocean. I'm an ocean researcher, teacher, entrepreneur, tech founder, inventor, ocean diver, and explorer. I've worked with and for fishing communities, and I've interviewed thousands of ocean stakeholders in over 38 countries. Both my research and my teaching experience required human and ethics approvals. I've also been in a position to influence ocean decisions, including on policies that limit pollution, protect endangered species, close fishing loopholes, build protected areas that work, and more. In one position, for example, I was in charge of deploying an artificial reef as biodiversity offsets for a development that was infilling an estuary 20 kilometers away. The government and organizations collected habitat data throughout the region, looking for a particular habitat type that could support tons of concrete being dumped on it without them sinking into the sediment or sea floor. Using those data, the government and organization chose a site. When it came to my desk, I knew that that site that had been selected was a particularly popular surf spot, but none of the decision makers knew that. Surfing was not on anyone's map. As a professional marine scientist, I could not install them in this undisturbed, socially important site without meeting 4 criteria. First, permission from locals. They needed to understand and accept the change. Second, a stamp of approval from an oceanographer that would confirm that the artificial reef would not erode the nearby beaches or degrade the surf site. Third, a synthesis of data that would confirm that the artificial reef wouldn't pull fish or animals from nearby natural sites and wouldn't increase invasive species, as well as evidence that there would be long-term benefits. None of these conditions could be met, so we abandoned that project. The surfers kept their surf, and we diverted our efforts to projects that made more sense. Win-win-win when ethical decisions are made. So how do we get these complex decisions right? What's the right way to collect and use ocean data ethically? Of course, I can't tell you that, but what I can tell you is how I went about developing the policies that would dictate how the eOceans platform collects and distributes data. I started by learning how other ocean organizations and decision makers do it, and then listening to others in various positions. I found that data policies varied widely, but generally fell into 4 main categories. The first is openly accessible and freely available, along with fair data principles, where the data are findable, accessible, interoperable, and reproducible. Means almost anyone can use these data for almost any purpose. This sounds great, but open access data can also be risky, especially to local communities and animals. Although some open repositories have protection for endangered species, targeted species and special places are still vulnerable. I can tell you that people who target certain species don't care about data ownership. The risks are particularly high in areas where marine spatial planning and enforcement are not. Similarly, open data generated by fishers or local knowledge holders is really unacceptable to those communities because it would expose special places and species. And there's an additional risk with local knowledge being made open because it diminishes the possibility of reconsent and puts researchers in an ethical conundrum. How can we publish if we didn't explain and gain consent? The second category is when organizations or people don't share data. They're gatekeepers. The reasons for gatekeeping vary. They can include corruption and greed, but it can also be more simple and/or legitimate than that. Some don't make their ocean data open or freely available because they provide data as a service. It's their business model. Others, especially small organizations or one-off research projects, don't have data sets that were designed to fit into larger sampling strategies, and they have self-created methods that aren't really easily shareable. Others, however, don't share data because they want proprietary access. This type of gatekeeping is particularly problematic when the work involves helicopter science or participatory or citizen science, where the data, information, and knowledge leaves the communities where they came from and where they were collected, and the locals don't get the value of the data or the insights. Additional challenges arise because participants and communities have wasted their efforts and resources, often in supporting that research, with very little benefit. In the third category, a lot of small, medium organizations, despite collecting data, do not actually have databases. In some cases, this is understandable because it's arduous and expensive to create and maintain and use databases effectively, especially if data science is not the priority. Not using the data, however, has ethical dilemmas. Marine animal first responders are a good example. They collect essential data, typically from phone hotlines, about marine animals that have died or are in distress, such as stranded, entangled, injured, and they need their assistance. Their priority is in helping the animal in need. So most don't actually maintain databases. But if they did, and they did it right, however, they could have powerful data sets that could help mitigate animal suffering by identifying and averting threats. Another example is education-focused NGOs and companies, or voluntourism. They send people, volunteers, citizen scientists, tourists, into the field to collect data. Most never move the data, however, off the paper log sheets and into data sheets, into spreadsheets. Some said they were hoping I would analyze their data for them, and a few have stated that they don't actually care because their goal is to make people feel engaged, not to actually use the data for science or conservation. The ethical dilemma here is multifold, because not only are the data not being used for conservation, marine spatial planning, science, but the participants are being misled into believing that they are collecting data for a cause and are wasting their time if they could have joined another organization that would have actually used their data. The fourth category is where the data can't be shared because of permissions. This was relevant to my own research. I worked at a university and would collect data about animals and ocean spaces using the observations made by humans. Depending on the project, I needed both human and animal ethics approvals. My permission to use those data, however, extended only to what the participants consented to, which was mainly the paper that would be produced at the end of the project. This is problematic because to repeat the study, for example, to see how shark populations have changed since they got additional protection, we'd need to recollect all that data. What a waste of time. Each of these categories has risks that slow and inhibit scientific and management progress, and they waste time and lead to a lack of trust between stakeholders, rights holders, scientists, and decision makers. Breaking silos and building bridges between different groups is one of the biggest obstacles that we have to overcome if we're going to rebuild ocean health. To effectively do this, caution is needed throughout the phases of research and development, business model creation, investment, scaling solutions, and policy creation to ensure that data are collected and distributed ethically. And coastal communities also have an important role to play in advocating for themselves and making sure that they know what the data are being collected, who has access, and the risks. They may even want to have policies to make sure that they can benefit how they want to. So why does eOceans care? Our mission at eOceans is to be the company that helps rebuild ocean health and wealth by bringing people, data, and knowledge together in real time for actionable decisions. Our metrics of success are bountiful marine species, healthy marine ecosystems, and thriving coastal communities. We spent years researching and developing the policies that dictated the design and function of the eOceans platform. The eOceans platform empowers and enables local knowledge holders, scientists, fishers, tourism operators, recreational explorers, and so on, to quantitatively tell their stories. They start by logging their activities and observations in the eOceans mobile app. To break silos and facilitate collaboration across locations and perspectives, eOceans harnesses both the approach of fair data while also adhering to the concepts of privacy, consent, and data sovereignty. The data that come into the eOceans mobile app or that are exported through the platform are standardized following international standards that facilitate data sharing. No need to do it yourself or to spend hours fixing those that aren't standardized. Instead of making the data open and freely available like others do, the eOceans platform itself is open and free. Users can contribute as much data as they like on any species, any issue, anywhere in the world's ocean or connected freshwater ecosystem for free. eOceans staff use the eOceans data and platform to track global trends in a few things that they're interested in, like sharks and rays and their threats. But the power of the platform is that it can be used to power research of others, any species, any issue, any activity at any spatial scale that any other organization wants to do. To enable collaboration, transparency, and trust, eOceans users own their data. They decide how their data can be used, and they can assist with the interpretation of results. They can also facilitate knowledge distribution and are an integral part of the action dialogue. The data cannot be removed from the platform for external purposes without the explicit permission of the data contributors. This way, participants are empowered to decide how their data are used and can be part of the risk mitigation strategy. Additionally, all the data within each project are automatically analyzed by the eOceans platform, and the results are displayed in near real time so that contributors can always see what's happening in their communities with their contributions. Finally, for further transparency, the eOceans platform has a dedicated space for projects to declare their ethics statements and acknowledgements, like funders, so that all project leaders can transparently share any potential conflicts of interest with their contributors. So what's the call to action? Listen and act. Initiate productive conversations with coastal communities, innovators, entrepreneurs, investors, organizations, and governments in the data collection, storage, and distribution space. Develop communities of practice and policies that deploy ethical strategies for oceans data to support an equitable blue economy without jeopardizing coastal communities. And let us know. We'd love to hear from you. What strategies do you develop? Getting this right is not trivial. So the more detailed conversations we can have with broad audiences and perspectives, the closer we can all get to a healthy and equitable ocean spaces. And that brings me to you and the role that you can play in getting ethical data collection and sharing in your ocean or organization. Let the organizations that make decisions in your area know about the need for collaborative, transparent, real-time science to make informed decisions in collaboration with people and communities. In the meantime, log your own observations in the eOceans mobile app. You never know when the data will come in handy. Follow me while you're there because we can all learn from each other. If you're on your mobile device, you can get started by downloading the eOceans app on iOS or Android. On your desktop, you can join at eoceans.app or learn about our science at eoceans.org and say hi through the regular social media channels. I hope this video will help you to initiate conversations on the ethical use of ocean data so that together we can build and diversify a regenerative and equitable blue economy that is good for the ocean and those who depend on it. For the ocean, for us.